Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are listening to us from and on this big, beautiful planet of ours. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where, as our motto, we say, question authority. That's right, and that came from none other than Benjamin Franklin. Now, the thing that I would like to deal with tonight, before I get into that, I should make a little plug, check out my website at michaelcross.net or my YouTube station at Michael Cross. Anyway, what I'd like to deal with at this moment is the issue of, the advantages of, I should say, of buying more and more of your stuff locally. And I don't mean driving down to the local big box store, okay? I mean actually buying your stuff from small businesses, local farmers, and that sort of thing. Because we hear a lot about how we are becoming a centralized oligarchy. Okay? For those of you that are not familiar with that term, an oligarchy is somewhat similar to a monopoly, except that in a monopoly, you figure there's one corporation that owns everything. Whereas an oligopoly is where you have a variety of mega corporations that carve out their niche and they stifle the competition from the little guy. Now, Jimmy Carter recently said the United States was no longer a democracy, it was an oligarchy. Have to agree with him. You've got, and the same is starting to happen more and more in Europe, where countries will have dominant corporations. And these corporations can kind of, they call up their local parliament member or congressman, senator, whatever you call it, and they ask for a lunch so they can discuss some policy. You better believe there's more likelihood that they're going to get lunch than if you, as an individual, call up your representative and say, hey, this is Todd or this is Daniela, and, we'd like to just chat over lunch about what your stands are on this particular issue. Okay? Chances are you're not going to get much of an audience. Now, the thing is, I'm going to go through a variety of reasons why maybe this should be something you change. Okay? This should be right up there on the top of the agenda for your consumer purchases. Because most people don't connect to this. I think most people that would listen to this do. But a lot of people out there just don't connect to the idea that when you buy something, you're voting for that product to be made more. Okay? So, in a sense, when you watch a TV show, if it's connected in some way to some sort of tracking system in which they can tell that you're watching that TV show, they're going to make more TV shows like that if lots of people, tune in. Same with music. If you pay for certain types of music, they'll make more of it. If, on the other hand, you go to a very large corporation and buy your stuff, then that corporation's getting your vote. It's getting your resources, and that will enable it to lower its prices, perhaps, and make it more competitive against smaller corporations that might be, even more innovative. But yet they're not going to get the capital necessary to really do the job that would be necessary to really compete with a large corporation. And also, as we centralize our corporations, which means centralizing your choices, that means that local producers, okay, let's say Ted's, whatever, I'm making this up here, Ted's hardware store, they cannot possibly compete against a very large big box store, because the big box store can take a smaller profit margin and therefore survive on that. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these stores selling tens of thousands of hardware items maybe a day, then there's no way the small guy can really compete with that. So you got to ask yourself, well, isn't it better just to get more money, for what I've spent? If I go to the big box store, then I can get stuff cheaper. Well, ultimately, it doesn't come out cheaper because maybe Ted no longer can compete. So his company shuts down, which means less tax revenue to the state or to the local community. It also means less diversity when it comes to choices because perhaps he did offer some things that the big box store doesn't, because it's going to base its inventory on what moves, what sells, whereas maybe he had some stuff that was, stuff that it had a market, but not enough to really support him. And on top of that, where's Ted going to work? Okay, is Ted going to have to go on food stamps, which means more money being spent by the taxpayer? You see what I mean? We often don't consider the high price of low prices. I think there was a documentary out there called that at one time. I don't know, but I've used that phrase a long time. That it actually comes up, the idea that you will spend more in the long run for, if there's less diversity economically. So that's the number one reason I would say right there. Support local community businesses. I was just in Rome, okay? And that's really interesting. When you're in Rome, there is so much variety of things you can buy there. You have small companies, small restaurants, small cafes, small clothing stores, everything. And these are often just owned by just, a family or an individual. And it gives more variety in what you can find there. A lot more selection. And, it might, someone could say, well, maybe that's not as efficient. Maybe not. But ultimately you get more, community that way. More people have work that way, at least living wage jobs, and jobs that really give a sense of accomplishment. Okay? You could work 4 years for some department store, and, maybe you're going to be lucky enough to survive on the income, but you're always just going to be a clerk in that department store. And when you retire, you'll be replaced overnight. Versus if you have a small business, then that's something you can be proud of. This person, it sets a tradition for the community. So think about that a little bit when you're making purchases. Maybe it's better to be able to have this idea of what used to be called window shopping. Go down and just walk around the street and look into various stores and stuff to find things. Nowadays, what good's window shopping if you go to this mall on this side of town, it's going to have the same stores as a mall on the other side of town. And if you go to, the big giant department stores and stuff, that's going to kind of have the same stuff. Okay? It's kind of a muck culture. And yes, culture and items that we buy are interconnected to one another. Okay? They are. If you have things that are more local, then you're going to have more connection to the roots of that community versus if everything's just homogenized and I can buy this, I can go to this restaurant, but I can also go to this restaurant if I fly over to this other country and go to a mall there. Okay? It is, to a large degree, it is getting to that point where, you're going to go from one big city in Europe to another one in Asia or to the United States, and the stuff's going to all be the same if things continue the way they are. Okay? Yes, it's economically efficient in the short term, when it comes to cost. than it is to have lots and lots of, thousands of different choices. But ultimately, it does preserve culture and give people, I think, in the long run, way more choices. So, anyway, what are some other reasons that you can think of? And one of the things that really struck me is I saw this post somewhere in social media that says when you buy from a corporation, you're helping some CEO buy a third vacation home. When you buy from a small local establishment, you may be paying for someone to get, I don't know what it was, some little girl to get violin lessons, or a boy to be able to go to soccer camp that summer. Okay? That's how it really does boil down to, all right? In fact, it used to be that people would say, well, yeah, but those corporations put people to work, but do they put them to work in the United States anymore? Think about that. The people that have jobs in the United States in the corporate world are the ones who are more administrative at the top level. But those kinds of companies don't usually make their products in the United States anymore, and they're increasingly shipping those businesses to cheaper countries that can that maybe a worker gets paid hardly anything. And this is just my speculation right now. Okay, this is speculation. But I just was wondering, why did Barack Obama choose 2016 to go to Cuba? Okay, why did he go there? You think it's just to be like, hey, Cubans, I love you and everything, and let's make the past the past? Or do you think that we're going to see some large corporations maybe wanting to go in there and take advantage of low pay? Okay, let's see what just happens there, all right? Because I think very few people envisioned the idea that when Richard Nixon went to China and established better relations, that would eventually lead to a lot of the businesses in the United States relocating to China. I'll bet you they didn't think that. That was probably the last thing on their mind. It was probably like, it's going to be good, because people need to get along with one another. People, we don't want to have wars. We want to have cooperation, stuff like that. All right? And that's probably what they saw back in the early 70s when Nixon went over and made better relations with China. So what are some other types of things? Oh, yeah, let's not forget this. Okay, now this is one of those issues that maybe vegans are going to go, hey, wait a minute, it doesn't make any difference here. You're just, being nice and everything, but it's not really being nice. But I'm going to say it. If you buy from local farms, the animals are going to be treated better. Okay? Take a look at a local farm on how they treat their milk cows, how they treat animals that are being raised they're being raised for meat, okay? All right? Local farms, though. Check out how pigs and chickens and animals like this are treated. And then, I challenge you, go on to YouTube and just type in factory farms and animals. How are the animals treated at those places? Now, my parents used to, we didn't have a lot of land, but, they wanted to kind of have this kind of feel of being, in nature. So, they did the hobby thing. You raise some animals and stuff like chickens and so forth. And the thing is, I can guarantee you that the chickens they killed, those chickens tasted way different than the chickens you buy at the store nowadays. Okay? Totally different flavor. It would be almost like the difference between pheasant and chicken. And the thing is that with these chickens would wander around. They'd eat bugs, they'd eat anything. Chickens will eat anything that won't eat them. Sometimes they'll eat each other. One of them's sick or something like that. But the thing is that they have a chance to exercise. They have a chance to get out in the fresh air and so forth, and they're getting more natural food. And whereas if they're raised in a factory farm, in crowded conditions, artificial light, all this kind of stuff, you're going to get a difference. But the thing is, I'm just looking at from a ethical standpoint, yeah, sure, the animal's being killed. But in one, you could almost think maybe the chicken being raised on the farm is going to regret having to get its head cut off, whereas the chicken at the factory farm might be going, please get me out of this misery. Okay? So just do that. So that, and you buy from a local farm, you're probably going to get animals that were treated much better than the ones that were raised in these factory farms. And sadly, we're starting to, factory farms, sure, they're more efficient. You just crowd those pigs in, till they barely move and just feed them and feed them and feed them and feed them. Yeah, you're going to turn out more. You're going to turn out more meat. And of course, we define the meat as being, whatever you take off the pig. It may not be as lean as a pig that gets a chance to actually walk around and swim around in the mud and do all those kinds of things that pigs do in nature. So, there's going to be a quality thing. So maybe even if you're just at a regular store and you see like the organic or free range animal products being sold, yeah, they're more expensive. But think about the fact that when you buy those, you're encouraging those kinds of establishments. And if you live in an area that does have direct farm access to where you can go and sometimes buy a side of beef and put away in your freezer. Good storage there. Never know what's going to happen in the future. I'm not going to make any references to The Walking Dead, okay? But you never know. So anyway, the thing is that if you buy your food like that, you're going to get, in my opinion, you're going to get a different sort of animal, and you're also going to be encouraging more people to stay on the local farms. And just like I said before, when it comes to when you buy something at a local store, you're going to be maybe what you're doing is you're going to be helping to pay some kid's college. Okay, the farmer's kid, has to have college education, so you're sending him off or her off or whatever, and you're encouraging stuff to be bought in the farming community there. When they buy grain, when they buy this and this and this and this and this, they will buy from local more, if it's produced. So there you're doing something, you're doing something for animal rights. I know people, the real hardcore vegans are going to be saying, wait a minute, you're missing the point. No, I'm not, because most people are not going to give up eating meat. Okay. It's not going to happen. So we should look at the ethical treatment that we give to livestock. And I think you're going to get better at a local farm. And personally, I have not actually seen any studies that have convinced me that acre per acre, you really produce better, you're producing more if you do the factory farm approach. Maybe there's other factors you have to look in. But even if it was true that factory farm can produce way more per acre than the local farm, I still think it is a better thing to have local farms. And that connects us to our heritage. Okay, isn't it nice sometimes to be able, to take your kids? Sometimes schools will arrange these things where they go on field trips and go to a local farm and say, hey, there's where your milk comes from. I think a lot of kids nowadays have no idea where their milk comes from. They think it's probably produced in some lab someplace. And they're able to see the animals, and they're able to, connect in a more meaningful way. If nothing else, maybe the kids will learn, don't just, I don't like this hamburger, and just throw it in the garbage. Okay, they'll appreciate that it takes work and effort to get food, especially meat, onto their table. So, yes, that's another factor that comes in. Now, the other things that you can look at when it comes to the local community, I've already talked about the idea of you're helping the tax base of your community. The more local stores, the more things that are there, you're going to be encouraging more community development, because they'll be paying taxes, property taxes, or you got the sales taxes, stuff like that. Isn't it better to keep it more decentralized where everyone's got, all kinds of options for buying things? Okay. I like globalization in many aspects, but the whole idea of globalization for just big corporations to find cheaper labor and stuff like that somewhere, anywhere in the world, I'm not really a big fan of that. All right. I understand why they do it. I understand the whole concept of follow the money and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think it's better to have production at home. By the way, what would ever happen if we got in a war nowadays? I mean, a lot of our the minerals and the mines have been shut down because they weren't as profitable as getting the stuff from another country, that we use for our computers and our guidance systems for the military and stuff like that. What's going to happen, if we're suddenly caught with our pants down? Well, the reason why we won World War II, was because America was there to supply lots of items, like, because of the industrial might, they can turn out trains, they can turn out planes, they can turn out tanks, and just replace whatever was destroyed really quick. The Germans had a limited amount of ability to do that because of their resource and energy shortages that were, that they faced. And Japan was severely limited by it. So this is what really caused the war to be won. Yeah, sure, lots of men sacrificed their lives and so forth, but without that industrial might, then I speculate the Russians could never have held out, because, we were giving weapons to the Russians, the British, and so forth, and America could not have gone over and, conquered Japan. All right? So it would have been kind of a stalemate in the Pacific. So that's national defense there. So yeah, when you buy local, some of the people are like, I go to a farmer's market because I don't like capitalism. Well, that's capitalism. But the thing is, you are actually helping the defense industry, in a sense, at least America, to be able to maintain its independence and not be left vulnerable for lack of resources. Now, I said the thing about building communities. Wouldn't you? Isn't it kind of more fun to walk into a little bookstore that sells certain types of books, and the same person's been working there for 30 years, and maybe your parents bought some stuff there for your, when you went to school, and now you're buying stuff for your kids, and that same person that sold it is still selling it? Isn't that much better than, okay, on aisle 7 we have school supplies, books are on aisle 12, and that sort of thing. Or big bookstores that, they may be all nice, have a lot of selection, some ambient music in the background and some, coffee and whatever that they may offer. But ultimately, what is more fun? I think going through these little tiny bookstores is more fun. That's really my personal opinion. But the thing is, those kinds of things build community. Just like if you're looking for jewelry, all right, of a certain type. You go into Oregon, and there's a lot of this, like, really interesting, unique types of jewelry you can get at different stores because you have local people. A lot of them, like, ex-hippies and stuff like that, or hippies still. And they sell the kind of stuff that you can't get at a big box store or at a national jewelry chain. And it's always way more interesting to have something that's different than everyone else. Okay? That's way more fun. And in a sense, too, that if you're talking to the person that produces it, and maybe they can even show you how they make the stuff, then that's community. That is being personal with production. Even though you're not the one producing it, you're still personal in that you see how everything works. And I think that's quite interesting. And that's going to be lost if everything is just, big giant chains that, you load the supplies up in the truck and take them around, to the various stores and just drop them off. You don't know the people that make the stuff. You don't know the people that even deliver it. Now, the other thing too is accountability. If there's a certain store in the area that sells a certain product or service, let's just say it's anything. They you can come with your own examples here, but they sell a certain product or service. Then, if they do a good job, you can go, you're going to hear it word of mouth, and that will encourage the survival of that business. But it also gives you a chance to evaluate things better. And, you don't know. You buy something at a huge store and you don't know anyone else that's bought the same product. And then all of a sudden you find out, you talk to someone you inadvertently bump into, and they mentioned they bought the product. They didn't like it because it didn't do this and this and this, or it just wore out fast. And you find out, yeah, that's what happened to mine too. It wore out really fast. Well, local stores, it's much easier to have that kind of accountability. Okay? Because, the store, if it sells junk, is going to go out of business. So, some other reasons, ultimately, we've talked about animal rights. We've talked about, to a certain degree, environment, or maybe I should go into that a little bit more. I think ultimately the places that are in a community are going to be more caring about how the community is, how it's run environmentally, how the looks of the local area are going to be, and so forth. They really do care. Because they grow up in the community. Their kids go to school, same places your kids go. There is more a sense of accountability. That's something most people don't think about there. Think about maybe your last few purchases. Who would you contact if you had a concern? Or if you call them, think about how many. Press 1 if you want this. Press 2 for this. Press 3 for this. And then your number 75 in line. Please hold on. We really appreciate your business. Is that what you want? Or would you rather be able to just walk into a store and say, hey, maybe you should do this. Or that tree that you're thinking of cutting down over there. Couldn't there be some way maybe that you don't cut it down and maybe still be able to build around it? Okay, large corporation, they don't care what you think. The smaller one, they might listen to you. Now, some of the other aspects that you should consider ultimately is, we could talk about the macroeconomic things, trade deficits. Isn't it better to make something at home than it is to buy it from other countries? And then they get the money, but it's not being circulated here in America, or if you're listening in some other developed country. And so we maybe should consider these things. Again, whenever you spend money on anything, consider the fact that you're voting for more of that to be done or more of it to be made or produced. And then think about what you want to see more of. You want to live in a community that has lots of big giant corporations where you just go in and buy something? Or would you rather have your community look a little bit more like the 50s? I'm not saying, that everything was great in the 50s. You couldn't go and buy any computer or, really fancy phone and stuff like that. That's what I mean there. Okay? But your community can have character if you buy locally. And it gives you more things. And this is something I kind of forgot there. It gives you more to do. A lot of communities, they have craft fairs. They have local farmers markets. Where I come from, they had Saturday market. And, sometimes even just going down, just the idea of there's something you can do on Saturday morning that's different. Something you can take the kids to go see all these really interesting candles that these people make at home. or clothing and stuff like that. That's an experience. It's part of learning. Okay? It's not the antiseptic, sort of sterile, giant chains, approach to infrastructure. Okay? So please, give it some thought. This summer, it's a perfect opportunity. Go out, buy some stuff that's locally made. Try to go a little bit. Try this as an experiment. I don't know if you buy into the whole, you should go organic because it's healthier for you. I don't know. Some of the claims I see from the people that say, you need to eat more natural foods and stuff like that, I'm not totally sure of. But many of the others, they make a lot of good sense. And I think this is why more and more people that don't, more and more people that don't wear sandals all the time and wear tie-dye t-shirts and that sort of thing. More and more just everyday people are shopping at places that sell natural, organic foods. Make this a trend for a lot of stuff. Give it a try. See what you think. It's not that much more expensive. Maybe ultimately, what would you rather have, though? Would you rather have a locally sewn special sweater or two that you could buy at the department store? Okay, what would mean more to you? What is more unique? Think in those terms once in a while. And maybe we could have a healthier community, healthier individuals, and a more well-rounded society overall.